So you made a statement on rates modernisation in Tynwald this month. What progress has been made so far? Because this is a long-standing issue now.
Yeah, finally in June 2018 we agreed we'd do something, and I said I'd report back on progress about what we've done. Now recruiting for a person to work with me and others to take forward a project for 6 months, a really profound project that has the potential to change rates for good, finally, because this has been kicking around for decades. Alan Bell made a commitment in 2011 that there'd be rates modernisation by the end of his administration. It didn't happen. We had it slightly earlier in this administration. The Chief Minister said he regrets, it's one of his big regrets, that we hadn't managed to make progress sooner because of other priorities. But I really do think now that with this 6 months focus we can work out the answers to the questions that have been there for some time, and we will modernise rates.
Because there was a fear from Ramsey MHK, Laurie Hooper. He expressed a fear and wanted a commitment that something would be done within the term of this House of Keys.
Yeah, well, it'll sound like Alan Bell, and it'll sound like the people back in 2004 when they make a commitment, when I make it, and there'll be a slight lack of belief, but I hope people can suspend belief. I hope my colleagues understand that we're serious about this, and 2020, 2021 we'll be coming back with the way that we will be asking Tynwald to approve the modernisation of rates, finally.
Now you're going to appoint somebody to look at this, like you say, for 6 months, dedicated to this project. Is 6 months long enough?
Well, in those 6 months we'll have made the decisions about what we're going to take to Tynwald for them to decide in May 2019, so in that sense it is. So we've still got some issues about how we change the law. I've made a commitment to have a bill in Tynwald the year after this one, next parliamentary year. So we've got to make some decisions about single occupancy, rebates, collection, about the basis of how we go about collecting rates, what sort of system it is. That's one part of it. We've got to work out how we're going to do the revaluation, rates revaluation, because that's long overdue. So we'll try and use data that we have on computers, from the census, from mapping, from other sources of data that we have, perhaps to come up with an assessment of where each property might be in which band, and then ask for people to confirm that themselves over a period of time. We've got to work out a few other questions that are profound, but I think in those 6 months we'll have enough time to organise a consultation, present the information such that we have a really good debate in Tynwald in May 2019. We make some decisions, and I really hope my colleagues in Tynwald will have the courage then to sort it by the end of this administration. It's down to Laurie Hooper just as much as it's down to me.
Now, you've said that you're going to commit resources to this time. I mean, it's been talked about a lot. It's been battered about between Treasury. It's then handed to the Cabinet Office.
Yep.
Money was approved for the project back in 2015, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And you're finally going to start using that to do something meaningful, presumably.
And money was approved by Tynwald, but it was never actually put in anybody's budget, so it's never been there to spend. Tynwald approved for it to be taken from reserves. So part of the issue is that we collect about just less than 20 million using the rateable values for local authorities, and we collect just more than 20 million to pay for water and sewerage services. So it's a lot of money, 40 million, but a commitment was made by Mr Tier and earlier politicians before him that we weren't actually looking to increase the amount of money collected from rates. We were looking to distribute it more fairly between households. So the issue we've got is, why would you spend £2 million on a return of investment that you know is zero? Because we're not looking to collect more money, we're just looking to distribute the collection more fairly. So that's always been the case that people like Treasury can make. Why spend £2 million now when every pound is precious, not to get more money? Anyhow, fairness is an objective in itself, and that's the most important thing now. We want to actually share the distribution and the burden of paying for local services and water and sewerage services fairly. The other issue in all of this is there are winners and losers, and that's always put politicians off, because politicians like issues that are crystal clear what's the right thing to do. This isn't the right thing to do in this sense is to make things fairer, but there are different views about what will make this situation fairer.
Has this become a more urgent issue since it's no longer solely a local authority issue.
Yeah, and that's what I spotted in 2016, which that year, for the first time, the amount collected from rateable values was greater for water and sewage than it is for local authorities. There are 22 local authorities, and then beyond that there are burial authorities who use rates as well. There's only one Manx Utilities Authority, so I was delighted that we've now got a settlement on 5 years of pricing for water and sewerage, and in one sense that makes it clearer, because now we have an all-island tariff for water and sewerage, but the amount that's paid, as Laurie Hooper pointed out, will be different depending on unfairness between rateable values in different parts of the island. So there's now an incentive and an imperative for us to work out distributing the largest part of the collection, which is water and sewerage, fairly.
Now, going back to 2015, there was a consultation held then, and there was something like 1,500 responses to it. You're planning to consult further in February next year. Isn't there a limit on how many times you can consult with the public over things like this?
We won't be consulting on what we've consulted on before, so we got a clear answer in 2015 about domestic properties and the valuation of them. What we didn't consult about then were things like how we would go about it once we have a real system. We didn't consult then about extending the reform to include non-domestic rates, and that's what we're going to be consulting on about this time. We won't be repeating the 2015 consultation.
Now, you mentioned a 7-point plan in your answers to some of the questions in Tynwald. I mean, what does that contain?
That's basically the job description initially for the person working on this as a project manager, and then thereafter it'll be the issues that we need to address in that debate in May. So it talks about the extension of the potential reform beyond domestic rates to non-domestic rates. It talks about the process of collecting those rates. It talks about the law for which we need to draft instructions so that we can have an amending bill to the Rates Act, Water Act, Sewerage Act. It talks about making sure that the people understand where there is unfairness so that we can come up with an informed decision about how we deal with that perceived unfairness in the future. So, for instance, there are some parts of the island that benefit more than other parts from commercial rates. There are certain parishes that collect a greater proportion than average from companies. It helps having an airport, helps having a hospital, it helps having a quarry. That's the sort of thing that I want to make sure people are au fait with when they come to make up their minds about what they will perceive to be a fairer system.
Now, this whole project started as a bid to carry out a revaluation project for the domestic properties in the Isle of Man. It's evolved now into something much bigger with far broader scope than originally intended. I mean, has it become a bit of a monster?
Well, it's larger than it was, but I think by making it all-encompassing and covering all the issues, I think it might be easier to solve the specific issue of the perception that the 1969-71 valuations are unfair. I don't think you could solve that without solving some of the other issues. So I think by making it larger, we make the problem simpler, and I do think by 2021, in your new job, we'll be sitting here and talk about the success of when we addressed rates.
Now, there was talk of it being linked in with local government reform, and there were fears that it may be linked to that, and therefore there would be no movement on this project because there is a perceived lack of appetite for local government reform, certainly on any large scale. Are the two intrinsically linked?
They're connected, they're certainly connected, but one can happen without the other. So I chaired a committee in 2014 looking at rates modernisation, and one of the recommendations we came up with was that rates revaluation and rates modernisation was necessary alongside local authority modernisation or transition. The two could go at different speeds, and that's the same conclusion that they reached in the 2011-16 government as well. There they had a priority on rates modernisation ahead of local authority transition. But I do think if we modernise rates, that will actually accelerate the process of modernising local authorities as well. There's also a connection with how we raise the costs of delivering water and sewerage, and I've linked that together in the sense that they're going along as parallel projects as well.
Now, it's always been said, and you've said it yourself, that this is essentially a zero-sum game for Treasury in terms of the money that comes back into government and is divided between local authorities and goes to Manx Utilities. But money needs the amount of money that government needs to run the authorities and to provide the services is only going to increase. So presumably over time, it's going. Is it really a zero-sum game? I suppose is the question.
You're right. Already with the water and sewerage, we've linked rises there in service charges to CPI over the next 5 years, and the total cost raised by rates has increased quite a lot over the last few decades, and it will continue to increase for the reasons that you outline. And also, as I think you're hinting at, if a system is fair, it can be used to raise more money. If a system's perceived to be unfair, politicians and society will be reluctant to use it for raising any money. So it could be in the future another politician will decide to use the rate system more, because it is the case that we pay a lot less in the island for local services than they do across, for instance, or that they do the other side of the water in Ireland.
Are you confident that this project will be completed within this administration? We go back to that question that Laurie Hooper was asking.
Yeah, the Chief Minister said that it was one of his regrets, alongside mental health, about the programme for government so far, because of Brexit and other international issues and some massive social issues that we've dealt with, like funding of residential and nursing care and public sector pensions and the economy. We haven't quite had the chance to apply attention to it until now, but now we are. I'm confident that we can have a good shot at building a political consensus and a social consensus, so that by the end of this administration we have an amended law, an amended system, and I really do hope the revaluation can be either completed or very near completion by the end of this administration.